Welcome back to Marketing for Your Future. I'm your host, David Benfield. On this show, we talk to digital marketing experts to give you some pro tips to help you along in your career. So joining me today all the way from Louisville, Kentucky, is Maggie Kimberl. She is the, I believe you said, the president of the Bourbon Women Association?
Correct. I'm the president of the Bourbon Women Association and the content editor of American Whiskey Magazine.
That is super cool. So
Talk
to me about the Bourbon Women's Association. Like, what specifically do you, as a president, what do you do for that association? And on the back end of that, what is that association?
So I'll start with what the association actually is.
Yeah, let's go flip
So the Bourbon Women Association was founded by Peggy No Stevens. She was the first woman in the Kentucky bourbon industry to ever become master taster. And so about 12 years ago, she left that position and went out on her own as a consultant. And she had this kind of nagging feeling in the back of her mind that whiskey brands were not really marketing effectively to women. And so she started the association with the plan to facilitate better conversations between whiskey brands and female consumers. So 10 years ago, the marketing toward women was, it ranged from non-existent to maybe a little ham-handed. And so she wanted to facilitate better conversations that were maybe a little bit, more educational and, a little bit more comfortable for women consumers, because a lot of times, women don't appreciate really being marketed at.
Right.
Women want to be part of the conversation. And so that was really the main goal. It was facilitating better conversations, giving women a better opportunity to engage with their favorite whiskey brands, and then also supporting women in the industry. And so I became the president of this association back in January. And basically what I do is I facilitate I'm the one, setting up and facilitating all those conversations between brands and women now. So, I'll go to brands and I'll say, hey, do you want to participate in this event or this event? Or do you want to do a virtual event with us? We've been doing a lot of virtual events, obviously, since 2020. And, it's really just about finding that right fit as far as a brand education and something that our members would be interested in learning about.
That's pretty impressive and very cool. So why bourbon? Like, how did you get into bourbon? How did you wind up as the president?
Well, that's actually a really funny and interesting story. So when my kids were little, I worked part-time at the liquor store. I needed a part-time job, needed some extra grocery money and needed to get out of the house. And the liquor store was a place where there were no kids. So, it was a great fit for me at that point in my life. And so I could have my little, my downtime to go to work and actually talk to adults for a few hours every night. And, that was back in the days when, the bourbon boom was really kind of at the bottom of that upward trajectory. Bourbon had experienced a pretty major downfall actually for several decades, starting in about the mid 60s. It just gained this reputation as being a working class drink or an old white man's drink or your grandpa's drink, and everybody was really drinking clear spirits and beer and wine. And so, really when the popularity started to ramp back up, that was right at the time when I was working at the liquor store and I was learning all about wine and beer and all that kind of stuff. And I was really into the farm to table movement at that point in time. And so I looked over at the bourbon aisle. I was like, hey, they make that stuff down the street. Maybe I should learn about that. So I started learning about it. We had master distillers who would come in and do tastings and bottle signings, which is unheard of now. That was back in the days when nobody really knew who they were. Bourbon wasn't really as popular. It was starting to become popular. And it was really because all of the work that those master distillers did, sitting in those stores, talking to people, doing tastings and things like that. And so one week it was Derby week. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Kentucky Derby. It's kind of a big deal around here.
Very familiar.
But everything in Kentucky is just absolute chaos and pandemonium during Derby week. And the liquor store is no exception. And so Jim Rutledge was the master distiller at Four Roses at the time. And he was in my store doing a tasting and a bottle signing. And every time I would try to walk around from behind the cash register to go talk to him, a whole horde of people would come in and I would have to go back to the cash register. And it was like that for the entire 3 or 4 hours that he was there. And then he was packing up to leave and I had to go on break. So I was sitting in the break room eating my sad little peanut butter sandwich. And the next thing I knew, Jim Rutledge came through the door with bottles in one hand and cups in the other hand. And he was like, "You didn't get to do my tasting." And he actually sat down with me for like 20 minutes and taught me the proper bourbon tasting technique, a little bit about the history of Four Roses, why they have 10 different recipes. And that was really my aha moment. I was like, this stuff is amazing and I have to tell the whole world about it. So I quit my job and started writing about whiskey.
Wow. That's impressive. Yeah, there really is a lot more to bourbon and like whiskey than like a lot of folks would give credit for. Here in Jacksonville, just down the road in St. Augustine, we have a distillery, and they pump out bourbon. And they started out by like making a bunch of vodka and rum because it's quick, and gin. They can turn this stuff over real fast because it takes like 4 years at the very least, I think is what it is for bourbon.
There's not technically a minimum age for bourbon, but in order to be straight bourbon, it has to be a minimum of 2 years, and in order to be bottled and bond, it has to be a minimum of 4 years. Yes.
Okay. Cool.
And St. Augustine Distillery, Philip McDaniel actually was one of our speakers at our symposium conference last month. I've known Philip for several years now. He is very knowledgeable on especially direct-to-consumer shipping issues, which is something that there are a lot of folks in the industry trying to change that because consumers don't really understand, you can buy everything on Amazon except whiskey or, spirits. So there are a lot of places where you can still get wine delivered. I think it's 46 states or so you can get wine delivered, but in, it's maybe like only 9 to maybe 20, depending on every time you cross a line, who can ship in and who can ship out changes. So it's very complicated. Yeah, he did a fantastic job. He and some other folks actually changed the laws down here in Florida. So that was really impressive. That's one of the things that was one of the first things that I interviewed him about, as a matter of fact, because, he's pretty much setting the archetype for the rest of the country doing the work that he's doing down there. Right on. Well, unfortunately, Maggie, I really could sit here and talk whiskey with you for, we could do shows about this in all honesty, but I've run out of time for you today. I apologize. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Absolutely. Thanks for having me. All right. So if you want to learn more about Bourbon Women Association and Miss Maggie Kimberl over there, head to dailyadbrief.com. I'm your host, David Binfield. That's going to do it for Marketing for Your Future. We'll see you next time.